Number 10 on our list is the Nebraska Cornhuskers. And I think this is going to continue to be a polarizing team in the Big Ten. Last year, Nebraska finally broke through. They finally made it to a bowl game and won in a soggy Fenway Bowl over Boston College. Dylan Raiola comes on the scene, and he was fine. Didn't take the top off every defense like maybe some people were projecting him to. Certainly didn't make it to the playoffs like we had maybe talked about last year in our preview season. But it was...
Listen, that was a long shot bet. You know it. Come on.
It was...
I was just throwing some money out there.
It was, listen, the schedule, the way you broke down the schedule, you made a convincing case. They just didn't quite make it there. But Matt Rule continues to stack wins and continues to level up the foundation. And that's been the recipe for success everywhere Rule has gone, right? Did we see the year 2 run to the playoff and a jump to 10 wins? No. But I think in practicality, you're starting to see the buy-in, the culture, and Matt Rule's system get in place. Garrett, I feel like the offense certainly needs to be more efficient, but Nebraska is headed in the right direction. And in a conference that's as loaded as the Big Ten is, that's worth something.
Nebraska is on the Matt Rule schedule. It's all according to plan so far. I went and looked at this just to make sure I'm not going crazy here. Year 2 at Temple, they went 6-6. Year 2 at Baylor, they went 7-6, and year 2 at Nebraska at 7-6. We're right on schedule. You want to hear the year 3 records? At Temple, year 3, 10-4. At Baylor, year 3, 11-3. I'm not telling you to buy the Nebraska stock. All I'm saying is we are right where he's used to being, and we're doing the exact thing that you're supposed to if you're a Matt Rule rebuild team. And they didn't even start as down in the dumps as Temple or Baylor did. I mean, both of those teams were like 1 or 2 win teams in those first years. So, look, obviously when Nebraska gets a bigger program, it's a lot more eyeballs on that and the, selling out and all that stuff like that. And Raiola has made it, maybe difficult on himself with some of the antics and the trying to look like Pat Mahomes and all that stuff. For the record, I have zero issue with it. Play your game, do your thing, but you got to back it up at a certain point. I think, look, it's just time for a year 2 for him to make that jump. It's time for him to get the full year, in the off-season program and with the weightlifting and the learning the offense and everything else. I'm really excited about what this can do, especially with the Dana Holgorsen offense. I think that this is going to look a lot better. At least I'm hoping it looks a lot better for Nebraska fans' sake. I'm fairly high on Nebraska this year. I know that we maybe jumped the gun a little bit last offseason with them, but I think there's a lot of reasons to be excited about Nebraska this season.
I think one of the biggest reasons when you talk about quarterback development, early on in the season under Marcus Satterfield, Raiola did not look comfortable. They were trying to throw the ball down the field way too often behind an offensive line that just frankly wasn't that good. And so you saw Raiola take a lot of bad sacks, and it threw the momentum of a number of drives off. As soon as Dana Holgorsen got in town, he leveled up the physicality of that offense, and he started to institute a lot more of those quick pass plays, right, to get the quarterback in rhythm, get them comfortable. So now you bring in a couple of key transfers along the offensive line. Rocco Spindler comes over from Notre Dame. That was surprising to see him leave South Bend. Elijah Pritchett comes from Alabama. And so this is one of the most talented offensive lines I think that Nebraska has had in a number of years. And then you throw in guys like Dane Key, hell on wheels at the wide receiver spot from Kentucky. Nazea Hunter, who had a great freshman season at Cal, transfers over to the Midwest to play wide receiver for the Huskers. And suddenly you can start to see very on brand for Matt Rule, that progress take place. And if you're compounding the wins, just like you do in finances, right, suddenly you start to get those bigger and bigger returns that can really grow the bank account. It wouldn't shock me, given the roster construction this year, if Nebraska was able to reel off 9-10 wins. Now, the question that I have going into the season for Nebraska is the defense, right? They lose Tony White to Florida State. They lose Terrence Knighton to Florida State. Those were big losses along the defensive staff. But Rule elevates John Butler from within the program, and he loves to attack, right? That was one complaint that Nebraska fans had, I think, all throughout last year, was it just never felt like the defense was necessarily like winning the fight. It didn't feel like they were those dogs kind of at the throats of their opponents. this year, that's exactly what Butler wants to do. He wants to get in the backfield. He wants to sack your quarterback. He wants to turn up the heat on third down. And, he most recently turned the Buffalo Bills secondary into kind of a no-fly zone from 2018 to 2023. So the guy's got some skins on the walls. If he can see results early, maybe you do start to see that momentum really build for Matt Rule and Nebraska have a special season.
I think the one thing that's giving me a little bit of cause for concern for Nebraska is that front seven. Rebuilding the defensive line. It's been strength for both of Matt Rule's first 2 years. They're just going to have to rebuild. I'm not saying it's not talented. I'm not saying that they don't have some dudes that could step in, but they are going to have to find that rotation that works for them. And the linebacker core is just young. They're going to rely on a lot of freshmen and sophomores to fill out their rotation. They did go get the Sun Belt Defensive Player of the Year in Marquise Watson-Trent. So that's a big pickup to bolster that linebacker core. But, man, I was ironically high on Nebraska last year. I actually am high on Nebraska this year. I think 9-3 feels about right to me. It would fall a little bit short of the Matt Rule year threes that Garrett broke down earlier, but 9-3, you're splitting the 4 games that I think are going to decide this season are Michigan at home, at Minnesota, and then USC and Iowa at home to close the year. I think if they can find a way to split those, maybe lose to Penn State, that's fine. You're looking at 9-3. If they can find a way to go 3-1 in those 4, they're in the college football playoff. But, man, I think, yeah, I know.
You're not wrong. I mean, just schedule-wise, that's some pretty significant wins. For me, the big ones.
But, guys, you look at the beginning, they're either going to start 8-0 or 4-4. Like, like nothing in between.
Yeah.
Sorry, Garrett. Go ahead and finish your
No, I was saying the big one for me is just that Michigan game. I think it's all going to kind of hinge on that one in terms of that early season success and the ability to ascend to one of those top tier things. There's not really a lot of opportunities for those big, like, marquee wins through the season up until they get, in my opinion, to Penn State. I mean, it would look good to beat USC. I think we would all respect a win against Minnesota on the road. But just in terms of, like, recognition that's going to resonate with the college football public, generally speaking, if you don't win against Michigan, I think there's going to be a lot of, but you didn't play anybody's. And so, look, I mean, I'm not saying that Nebraska's like key it in, they're going to the playoff, but there's like, I think there's a lot of wins to be had before the last part of that season where, you got USC, Penn State, and Iowa as 3 of your last 4. There's a lot of wins to be had on that schedule up before that point. And Trey, if you're giving me 9-3 as kind of a realistic, seems like it could happen, go win your bowl game. You get to 10-3, you're still right on schedule. You're right there where you're supposed to be with Matt Rule. I think that he's doing things the way he's always done them. Again, big steps are needed, right? Dylan Raiola's got to stop turning the ball over. But if he can stop doing that, maybe, go throw for 3,000 plus, I think it'll be a good year for the Cornhuskers.
Friday night, October 27th, feels like maybe the game of the year for Minnesota, or for Nebraska. Freudian slip. At Minnesota, short week following a road trip to Maryland. So it'll be multiple weeks since they've been home. It's a tough place to play on a short week at night. It'll be Fox's, night game of the week. It's scheduled for 8:00 Eastern right now. I feel like if they can win that game, suddenly you start to look at them differently when they host USC, when they go on the road to UCLA, and we'll see what happens with Penn State. But all of a sudden, Iowa in the season finale, anything can happen in the Heroes game. We've seen both teams pull off wins when they probably shouldn't have. And this year, I don't know that you're going to be able to say that about one of those two teams. I think Nebraska and Iowa are both going to be very strong teams. And so truly, a rivalry game against two teams maybe contending for a spot in the college football playoff, potentially a dark horse bid at a conference championship game. There could be a whole lot on the line at the end of this year, and I am very, very excited to see that. Last note I'll say on Nebraska, Trey, you mentioned the defensive line. Riley Van Poppel is going to be one of those guys that they look to really lead the Huskers up front. Makes me feel old to no end to see the son of my former pitching coach being named as, one of the X factors for the Nebraska Cornhuskers, because, man, when I was throwing bullpens back in the day, Riley was running around in our facility and, big kid, but you just didn't know what he was going to become. And all of a sudden, he's legitimately one of the game breakers potentially for a team that's trying to make it to the college football playoff. So that dates me a little bit, and that makes me feel old and sluggish.